Yes, thanks, John. I can try in 10 minutes to tell you all the answers to these rather important questions, and indeed questions that we all grapple with. I mean, most of the people in the room have some sort of management responsibility, and I don't necessarily mean that they have lots of people reporting to them. I mean that they have some responsibility, collective responsibility for getting work done in teams through collaboration with others. So this is an extract, if you like, from my book, which is going to come out in September. I just want to give you a couple of, hopefully, thought-provoking ideas, just to take back and to ruminate over. I don't have all the answers. There are never any simple answers to these important questions, but certainly a few things that you might be able to take away. Who are you happier spending time with? This is not my data. This is data collected by a famous economist at the LSE, actually, called Richard Layard. And he asks people who they're happiest hanging out with on a day-to-day basis. And there's the list. You can see the list: friends, parents, spouses, children, etc. To cut to the chase, the bottom line is we like our friends the most. Obviously, we meet them in certain friendly situations, but the bottom of the list is where you should focus your attention. The boss comes last. We would prefer to be alone, speaking to nobody, hanging around in some dark corner of our office, rather than interfacing with our boss. And there's lots of reasons for that. I won't go into it. There's good reasons, there's bad reasons. But the point is that if you actually look across organizations as a whole, and of course LBS, we've seen the numbers, LBS is actually a better managed organization than the vast majority. But even in a place like LBS, good management and bad management kind of mixed together. We've all had, shall we say, good bosses, we've all had bad bosses. And my kind of hypothesis is that we can do something particularly about those of us, frankly, who are not doing as good a job as bosses as we might be able to do. Because it's often said that when someone leaves a company, they're actually leaving a boss, not a company. They join a company and they leave a boss. When someone leaves, it's very often because they just simply haven't got on with the person who they are reporting to. What does make good management? What are the secrets of good management? What does a good manager look like? Well, I've been doing a lot of research on this, but fortunately I've got our friends at Google to do some hard numerical analysis of this. They collect up data on essentially personnel reports to try to figure out across the tens of thousands of people in the company what are the attributes of their good managers, the managers who get good results. I'll show you the list. This came out a couple of years ago. Be a good coach, empower your team, express interest in team member success, don't be a sissy, be a good communicator. What they mean by that, I don't know, it doesn't matter. The point is, here is their list of the 8 things that they are looking for. And you look at that list and you think, is that it? I mean, I kind of knew all of this. The article written in the New York Times on this called this forehead-slappingly obvious, if you see what I mean. This is not the product, if you like, of really clever, insightful science. It's a statement of the obvious. And here is the kind of the problem. Here is the dilemma, if you like, which is that in some ways we've already known for many, many years what good management looks like. If I'm to boil it down to 3 or 4 things, it is about giving your employees a sense of where they're going, a sense of direction, a sense of the value of the task they're doing, giving them the space to get on and do it themselves without being micromanaged, giving them the support they need when they ask for it, and giving them praise and recognition after they've done it. That is not rocket science. So the interesting question for me, as I started writing this book last summer, is why don't we do what we should? Here's a list of the habits of highly effective people. Some of you have probably come across this book, one of the best-selling management books of all time by Stephen Covey. But for me, it's actually very similar to the genre of dieting books and the genre of books about, for example, how to become better at golf. These are books with long lists of things that we should do, but when you are addressing that golf ball, if you're a golfer, or when you're thinking about your next diet, a long list of the 10 things you should do is not actually very useful, because it's hard to keep them all in your mind at the same time, and we all have these habits and routines and ways of working, ingrained behaviors that no list of items is going to help us with. So my book is actually not about what a good manager looks like, because we know what a good manager looks like. My book is about why don't we do what we think we should. And I've come to a hypothesis that being a good manager is a somewhat unnatural act. I tried to get an image to go with this word, but when I Googled unnatural act, I decided those images were not suitable for Thursday morning. So you just got the words, I'm afraid. What do I mean by an unnatural act? What I mean is that for most of us, the skills that we need to be a good manager are not things that come naturally to us, and not things that we would do habitually without conscious effort. And particularly, they're not the things that we kind of got us promoted to our position of manager in the first place. We have a lot of technical skills, most of us. We suddenly find ourselves as a manager, and we're asked to do something very, very different. So 2 little tips, if you like, about ways we can think differently about management to make it not so much a natural act, because I don't think it ever will be, but at least us much more conscious of what we should be doing differently. And the first is simply what you might call a fresh perspective on the problem. If you've ever studied the field of marketing, you'll know that marketing is about seeing the world through the eyes of your customer and understanding the world from their point of view. Well, for me, good management, one definition of good management is seeing the world through the eyes of your employee, essentially figuring out a way to enable your employees to do the best possible job that they can. Now, that might sound kind of obvious, but it turns out that there's a couple of little ways of using this in a smart way. They say that the Queen thinks the world smells of fresh paint, if you see what I mean. Whenever she goes on a visit, it is also always a sort of a long-heralded visit. Everyone knows she's coming. So what do? They give the walls a fresh coat of paint. They put on a show for her. And the world she sees bears no resemblance to the real world that is going on around her, because everything she does, it's like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle for the physicists in the room. If you try to measure something, you actually change the thing that you're measuring. So for me, the starting point for good management is put yourself in the Queen's shoes. What would we do in order to kind of get under the skin of our organization? You've probably seen this show, Undercover Boss, right? It's been around for a few years now. This chap here, Stephen Martin, was the second ever undercover boss, and he's also an LBS alumnus. And he comes and talks at the school sometimes. And as you know, the premise of the show is he spends 2 weeks undercover working as a labourer in his own organisation. Now, I'm not actually suggesting that Andrew starts working on the front desk incognito. I'm not sure he'd get away with it, because we are only 500 or 600 people, and everyone just about knows him. But for Stephen Martin, working in a big construction company, that's where he worked, on the front line, actually, he could do this without people really knowing who he was. And of course, as a result of that 2 weeks, he got insights that he would never have gained walking around the building site with his hard hat on, surrounded by a coterie of advisors. So the basic principle here is very simple, which is, without going to the kind of the trouble of being an undercover boss for 2 weeks, whatever position you are in an organization, whether you're a chief executive, whether you've just got 2 or 3 people reporting to you, there are ways of getting a little bit closer to the way things really work. And I'm not going to go through this list. These are things that you will recognize in a lot of executives end up spending a bit of time on the front line. They might, if they're a smoker or if they're a sports player, they will often have, shall we say, non-hierarchical conversations with the people that they're hanging out in those social groups with. Skip-level meetings is another well-known mechanism of having a conversation with the person 2 levels below you or 2 levels above you. Lots of ideas there for kind of cutting through the hierarchy. So that's my first point. Try to see the world through the eyes of your employee. My second and final point is actually, for all of us as managers, getting a little bit more comfortable with our own limitations and biases. We are all flawed, if you like. We are all behaving in ways which are not necessarily helpful to our job. There's lots of what's called behavioral economics research out there, which shows that we as managers, particularly managers, we all got flaws, but particularly these are a problem for managers, behave in ways that are counterproductive. Here's 2 pieces of evidence. Just bear with me. This is quite funny. This is a survey done of entrepreneurs. And they were asked, what's the chance of your new business idea succeeding? You're opening a restaurant. You're starting to sell your service as a consultant. What are the chances of your business succeeding? And what that chart says is that something like 33 of the respondents said the chances of succeeding are 100%. We will succeed, 10 out of 10. And obviously it goes down from there. When they were asked the exact same question about a business like theirs succeeding, what is the answer? Well, actually, on average, most people think that the chances of a business just like the one that they're about to set up will be about 5 out of 10, something like that. You see what I'm saying? We are, particularly when we get into our, shall we say, managerial ranks, we are generally overconfident. We are generally also control freaks. We like to be in control. We like to be calling the shots. This little chart, I won't go into it. These are all famous executives who over the last 12 months have tried to buy their ailing companies back from the public shareholders. Why? Because they think that those idiots who've taken over control of those companies don't know what they're doing, and that despite the fact that all three of those companies have real problems in terms of the strategies and the markets they're working in, these three executives are going to put their own money behind them, trying to anyway, to take those companies back and run them themselves. So you see the point. Executives like to be in control. They like to call the shots. They like to be on the front pages of the newspapers. When you compare that to the real tasks of management, of actually getting work done through others, it turns out that the best managers are the understated people who are happy to give other people responsibility, who are happy to share the limelight with others, who are happy to praise others for doing a good job rather than taking all the praise themselves. That's why I call it an unnatural act, because essentially the thing that comes naturally to most people, the higher they rise in an organization, is to be the guy on the stage telling everybody he's got all the answers or she's got all the answers. And in fact, most good managers, most really good managers, are almost the exact reverse. So there's no simple solutions, as I say. A couple of quick thoughts and then I'll finish. Can you give away some power? Can you find a way of giving power to others? Whether you think Tony Blair's government ever did anything worthwhile for this country or not is irrelevant. The very first thing he did when he became Prime Minister, 15 years ago, was he ceded control of monetary policy to the Bank of England. Up until that point, it had been owned, as it were, by the government. He said, this is something which the Bank of England should own. I'm going to give that power away. That is quite a rare thing. The chap on the right, some of you might have met him if you've ever been to any of my talks. His name is Henry Stewart. He runs a little IT computer company, a computer training company called Happy Limited. They run happy training courses. His whole philosophy is of making people happy. And his basic management principle is pre-approval of all decisions. If you want to propose something to him, he starts by saying, this is pre-approved, now write the proposal. Now, he can get away with that because it's a 30-person organization, so I'm not sure that would quite work in LBS. At some point, the bigger you get, the more you've got to put in place some sort of controls around things. But as a basic principle of saying, you are in charge, I'm only going to stand essentially as a reviewer of this. That is something worth thinking about. I'm going to finish with one final thought, if I may. Think back to when you were last really engaged in a piece of work. Most people, when I ask them that question, they think of a specific project, a time-limited project, a project which had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Why are those projects the things that we enjoy the most? Well, because we have a very clear sense of where we're going, we have a team we're working with, and we know when we're finished. If you think about it, most work can actually be packaged into projects. You know, we've just launched our big fundraising campaign. If you think about it, a campaign is a sort of a fabrication of a project around an ongoing activity of raising money. What we're trying to do as a school right now, as you know, is to try to raise up to £100 million is the target, but we've already got some sort of staging post at 50 million. We're trying to package the fundraising around the school's activities into discrete packages so that at the end of each package we can celebrate, we can say we've done a good job, we can pat each other on the back, and then we can kind of start the process all over again. And at a micro level, we can all do versions of that, package the projects, the work that we do, into little projects to make them more fun and engaging for all. So that was a very, very quick, short summary of my book. Thank you very much. Hopefully there was something in it for all of you. Thanks. Thank you very much.